Good morning and welcome back. My name is Michael Dennis. I am the Group Policy Program Manager, and I'm going to talk to you about resultant set of policy this morning. We're going to go over quite a bit of information, I think, as we get going. A couple of things I want to make sure of is that you understand that I am assuming that you have a Windows 2000 knowledge about group policy as we talk about this new feature coming in Whistler. So I'm going to give a little bit of a review on the current limitations. I'm going to go over our plans for Whistler, the issues driving resultant set of policy requirements, what some of the tools are currently with Windows 2000 to help in this space. And then I'm going to share some of the development information, the history, the status, and the plans of what we're doing and how we're going to be delivering this feature. What you should end knowing when I'm done here is that you understand what we believe are the customer needs being addressed by RSoP. What changes are occurring in Whistler from Windows 2000 that will support RSoP type tools, both ones we deliver and ones that could be delivered by ISVs. And I'm going to give you a pretty complete description of the tool that we will ship in the box in Whistler, what it will do and what it won't do. So, jumping ahead, or jumping back, if you will, I'm going to cover the current group policy infrastructure limitations. This is the essence of the problem. There are no public methods in Windows 2000 for each extension to expose what they do to outside of themselves. They're kind of black box, if you will, on the things that each of the extensions to group policy will do. Therefore, you don't have a tool, or let me clarify, you don't have a comprehensive tool from Microsoft. And there isn't a consistent method for others to build a tool on top of what we have. It's possible. I won't say that it's not, impossible, but it's very difficult, which makes it less inviting for others to build a tool. Currently, there is no way to view a group policy object without having write access to it. And we've gotten significant feedback that this is an issue. And RSoP, in an indirect way, will help address that. Also, in the Active Directory, auditing of group policy objects is not directly supported. There is auditing support for the Active Directory, but the issue is that group policy objects are stored not only in the Active Directory, but also on sysvol. So, the issue becomes how do I audit something that crosses two storage mechanisms? And this is RSoP will enable and make it possible for tools to do that kind and that type of thing. I resist the urge to call it pure auditing, but it is a way that you can get information back about what has occurred with regard to group policy in your organization. So one question is, and I'd like to go ahead and push that question out, is this a complete list for you? So let us know your feedback on that. A final point is that there are no reporting capabilities with the infrastructure that's currently in Windows 2000 today. So what are we doing? Well, we're going to enhance this infrastructure for group policy. The key here is that we're using WMI, and this is our back end for exposing what each extension would do or has done, depending on which way you're looking at the puzzle. One from a planning mode, so I want to know what it would do, and the other is from a logging mode, or what has already occurred on a workstation. The nature of this is that it isolates the user of the tool from the group policy object store, or stores more accurately, and it allows the reading of data without write access. And its main intent is to give you a cumulative bit of information about um, all of the results of group policy, but it can be used to figure out what's in a single group policy object. Using this infrastructure and changing this infrastructure, we believe, and have gotten tremendous feedback in this area already from a number of ISVs who we previewed this technology to, that they will enable them to create a very rich set of tools and products and things, even added to their own products that are doing other management-oriented things, to allow for diagnostic and planning and auditing type functions and that type of thing. So one of the questions is why? I mean, essentially the big question is why a resultant set of policies? Well, let's cover some of that. The big problem is what you have to do today because you don't have this capability. I'm going to talk about some of those things, and I want to validate. I have some questions for you along the way, and I want to validate with you that we're on track and understanding what your current, how you work around this today. So I'm going to talk about the group policy processes required in Windows 2000. These include things like the intense documenting that I've seen lots of customers needing to do up front to make sure that they understand how they've implemented this. The amount of testing that has to go on in a lab long before they can bring it into a real environment. That's some of the challenges for troubleshooting and challenges oriented to just monitoring the whole process of dealing with policy within an organization. So here's an example of ways that customers today need to track group policy. You'll note that we have what looks to be kind of a database looking thing or a spreadsheet looking thing. I've seen people using both kinds that lists the name of the group policy, where it's been associated, what policy settings are within it, what the actual setting or the value is that's been set, and whether there's anything special going on with regard to filtering or the override being set or blocking or any of these kinds of things. So this puts a severe burden in any environment where they need to do change management on the process of doing group policy, because you have to document everything that you do. And of course, one of the failures here, and I'm not advocating that you don't document anyway, I'm just saying they have to be very rigorous about it today because there's no way to go back and check it on the resulting end. Testing of group policy. There are very specific steps that you must go through and be very rigorous about, again, because you don't have these kinds of tools that will tell you post-implementation what's going on. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I think they should look familiar to most of you. So then the next one is resolving conflicts that occur with various group policy objects associated to different levels in your organization, whether it's a domain or various levels of OUs or with different filtering. Today, you're required to do this kind of in a manual process, and the steps are pretty clear. This is a short list. There's actually a much longer list that I'm sure all of you already know if you've been dealing with this. But you got to start at the top of the Active Directory tree and start working your way down, checking order of precedence for each group policy, check for any conflicts between the settings, check for no override and blocking, check for security group filtering, et cetera, et cetera. This makes for a fairly long troubleshooting or diagnosis period if you're having issues about, I thought I was going to get X and I'm getting Y. So next is the monitoring of group policy in general. Lots of things we have today that enable this. We use the event log and we put error conditions there, so you can go to the event log and see if there was any processing problems. If you're still not finding any issues and you still don't know why you're getting Y instead of X, you can turn on the verbose flag. There's the details in the slide there on where and how to turn this on, and then go look in the logs to see what has occurred with each of the processing of each of these things. It makes it a little awkward, I think is probably fair to say, to figure out what has occurred on a machine. The best practices. Mainly because of a lot of these kinds of the ability not to have RSoP in Windows 2000, you have to be very rigorous about these best practices. Some of these are performance-oriented, but there's one key one in there to limit inheritance, modification, filtering, and loopback, and all that is directly aimed at the fact that it's very difficult to know what has already occurred or would occur when you start changing group policy around. So, what are some of the tools that are available? Well, in the resource kit, we have a command line tool in true ResKit fashion called GP result, and it will tell you what has occurred with group policy almost entirely. There are a few bits that it still doesn't do, but it'll give you a pretty good picture. It will give you the picture of each of the group policy objects and a fair amount about the details of most of the policy settings that could be contained within a group policy object. If you haven't seen this, you should be taking a look at it because it's probably your best available tool that we ship that does any of this type of thing. You also take a look at a tool that Full Armor is nearing shipping. There's a link to them there. They have spent a great deal of time in the policy arena for many years, and they also are putting out tools that are based on the group policy infrastructure in Windows 2000. There's some other tools in the resource kit you should just make sure that you go see and have available to you. The group policy reference, or the gp.chm. It's a help file that documents all of the policy settings, 560 some odd. In Whistler, this information will be in help. Just to make sure that you're comforted in the fact that we will actually put this information in help, so it's searchable, printable, those type of things. GPO tool is another resource. It's a little off from the discussion here, but you should be aware that it is there if you're having to deal with replication issues with regard to the back-end infrastructure group policy. You should know that it's there and it's available in the ResKit as well. Just so you have an understanding of where and how you can go get some information from Full Armor Corporation, here's their website. They have a tool called FAZAM 2000, and I'm actually not exactly clear when they plan on shipping it. I know that they're doing some testing and that you can sign up for some of their betas and such there. I would suggest that you might want to check them out. Here's a quick overview of some of the things that you can do with GP result. It will get you the OS type, the build, whether terminal services is running or not, the username, the Active Directory location, all this information about group policy. Okay, next. It also gives you some detailed information on the last time policy was applied, a detailed list of the GPOs that applied, including a listing of the extensions that were run per GPO, and then a detailed list of the registry settings applied. And I note that there's a with preferences warning. Many of you have heard me talk in the past that the registry-based policies that we have are secure. They do not leave behind their policies when you change memberships somewhere else, and they don't overwrite preferences. But it is possible to create an ADM file and overwrite a user's preference. And those are left behind because they are outside of the policies tree. This tool will alert you to those cases, and in particular, making sure that you know that that has occurred. You may want it, but this at least tells you that it's happened. will tell you what folders have been redirected and published and assigned apps and those kind of things. Keep in mind that this is a command line tool and that there is no information that this tool is giving you on security policies, but you can go to the Security Configuration Editor and look at it there. There is nothing on the Internet Explorer maintenance policies, and there's no information on EFS recovery policies. So there's some limitations even in that tool. And it's in the res kit, so you got to buy the res kit to get your hands on it. So now that I've told you how bad the current tools are in the current situation, here's the plan. Using WMI, we're going to create an isolation layer that all group policy client-side extensions have already been modified, and you'll see it in the first releases that you get your hands on, to include a WMI provider. This gives us we will publicly expose the schema where this data is stored, and we're encouraging ISV development. I already mentioned that we had a preview with ISVs back last fall and talked to them about our plans on this infrastructure, and I can tell you that all of them were very excited about the possibilities of being able to utilize this infrastructure for building tools around it and for you. So let's look at the architecture of RSoP, how it works, and I'm going to step you through some of the ways and what we have today and what it looks like. So first, I have a client. WinLogon is the process that actually calls into each of the CSEs or client-side extensions, and it calls each of them. It actually calls each of them and gives them a list of the GPOs to process. At startup and logon, what we will have done is enabled them to report into the CIMOM database. That's the WMI database. What they have done. In a logging mode, we have two modes for the RSoP administrator UI that we're building. There's a logging mode and a planning mode. And in logging mode, this tool will go directly to that machine, query that CIMOM database for the results, and display it in the UI. In planning mode, since we don't have WinLogon to process these client-side extensions, we've created a service, GPDAS, Group Policy Data Access Service, that runs on the servers that mimics the behavior of WinLogon for the purposes of RSoP. It calls, like WinLogon did, each client-side extension with a list of GPOs and says, what would you do with this information? So it's a little different mode. It doesn't actually process the policies. It just says, tell me what you would do. Write that into an instance of the CIMOM database. And then the RSoP UI can look into that database to figure out what has happened, or what would happen in this case. So that's the basic high-level infrastructure, how we're putting the pieces together. So here's how some of the changes occurred. And take a look at this picture. We have the Active Directory where the group policy snap-in has each of the snap-ins there, and that's the UI there. This is how you're going to create this information. The client, using WinLogon, again, calls each of these client-side extensions. And here are the additions. We've added the GPDAS service on the Active Directory side, and you see in kind of red the WMI additions to the current infrastructure. So on the left-hand side for the client, you'll see that each of the client-side extensions have been enabled to report to WMI into the database, and also on the snap-ins to the group policy snap-in, they have been enabled with WMI to report into the CIMOM database, and again go back to the administrator UI. And if I could see all of you, I could figure out whether any of that made any sense, but I can't. So hopefully it does. If you have any questions, let me know. So here's our plan for a base level tool. In logging mode, we're intent upon telling you what was applied and by definition, resultant set of policy for a given target. In planning mode, it's what will be applied. We want to be able to view the potential state based on a user or a computer, a specific user or computer selected out of the Active Directory, or in a more open fashion, a site, domain, or OU with a different mix of security groups that you would choose for an imaginary user. So you can use the tool to do what-if kind of scenarios. To kind of make that a little more real, imagine that if I picked a user and a computer, a very specific one, it would understand its current group memberships and give me the resultant set of policy, the GPOs that would apply to each of those. If you wanted to do a what if, you could say, well, I see that the user is a member of these three groups. What if I removed this one and added this one? And then you say process, and it would come back and tell you what will occur. Similarly, you could select a particular OU in the environment for either the user or the computer or both, and pick out which security groups you might have this imaginary user a member of, and say process, and it would say, okay, if they were in that OU, and if the machine was in that OU and they were in these specific groups, here is the result that you would get. When we're done and when it's presenting this information, we need to be able to show you for each policy which GPO was the one that caused that setting to occur. And then kind of tied with that is the precedence order of the settings, so that I have some understanding that for a given setting, this is the one that won, and there are two others that were set by two other group policy objects somewhere else that had a different setting. So I could very quickly see that if I removed or changed the one that is currently affecting you, what the result would be for that setting in that case. We're going to give you a failed indication for the settings, and we're going to do this on both a per extension basis, so you'll have some knowledge that within a particular extension something has failed to apply, and then each of the extensions can give you more information. And some of the details of exactly how this is shaking out is we're still tweaking it a little bit, so I resist giving you too much information about exactly what this will look like, but it will be complete for the first release that you'll see. Keep in mind that there's a very similar look and feel for this tool as you have with the group policy snap-in. It's the same basic UI architecture. It has the same mechanisms of extensions that snap into it and provide this information. So for one of the questions that I'd like to ask at this point is, does this meet your needs? And if not, I kind of need to know what's missing. So spend a few minutes thinking about that. Is this everything that you think that we need to be delivering from Microsoft? So since we have exposed this WMI infrastructure, we're using the infrastructure to build that tool. But there's more that can be done with the data that we're exposing. For instance, all we're doing is saying, here's a logging mode view and here's a planning mode view, and you can figure out what those are. Well, in some cases, I might want to know what's the difference between what I saw in planning mode and what I saw in logging mode. And I'd want to have some sort of a comparison. Well, certainly an ISV could build a tool that could do that because all the data is available. We're not putting that capability in. We don't really have the time to go into that kind of development. But it is certainly possible for anybody familiar with WMI to build tools and extract this data and figure out and do this kind of a diff between planned versus actual. And this is actually a good point to make you understand that in planning mode, this is not a guarantee of what will get applied, keep in mind that there is still a local group policy object that can have some influence over what policy is being applied to that machine. And in planning mode, since we don't actually go touch the machine, it's all done in the directory. And on the server, we can't tell you what the impact of that local group policy object would be. However, you can go to the database on that machine and figure that out. Given that that data is there, and I could do this diffing, I certainly could build a tool if I were an ISV that based on a saved instance of here's what I want it to be and here's what I expect it to be, routinely go poke very critical machines or certain OUs, almost any combination of the ways that we could put this together and compare it. And then when there are any differences, alert me. Send me something to the console, send me email, page me, I could conceive of something like that being built. And of course, there's always the ability to do reports, either printed or web reports. There's all sorts of ways you could surface this data and present it to you. Change management, I kind of touched on that a little bit ago when I was talking about the possibilities here, but in some places it may be more desirable to implement something, use this tool to report it, or to plan on implementing something and figure out what it's going to be before you actually put it out, that kind of thing. And there could always be some integration with existing management tools. A lot of the ISVs that we talked to last fall have other management tools in the marketplace, and this could be an easy adjunct to that kind of thing. So one of the questions is, since I don't know all of the ISVs, is which ones do you work with? I want to make sure that we're letting them know about this information and be able to provide this information to all the ISVs that are interested in, could be building tools in this area. I'd also encourage you to go back, as well as telling me, but go back to them and say, hey, I heard there's this way that, this data is going to be surfaced in Whistler. Have you looked at it? Are you building tools? Here are my needs, so that they start understanding what the customer needs are here. Let's see if I haven't already covered all of this. Essentially, I want to make sure that I'm clear that the infrastructure supports not just RSoP tools. The auditing capabilities and the read-only access to a group policy object through the group policy, because there is no read-only access to the group policy snap-in, and RSoP infrastructure is read-only, it exposes all the settings. If you can make it so that it will expose a single GPO, right? And I could, with this data, I could certainly build a tool that would surface on a named basis a GPO. Our tool isn't actually doing that, but it is possible to surface that kind of information. So at this point, I'll open it up to questions, and there's a few. Okay. See if I can see what some of these. I see one from Darren. And any plans to provide tools that will help calculate performance impacts of adding or removing GPOs? Of course, this would have to be somewhat independent of network performance issues, but just a way to calculate possible impact, all other things being equal. That's an excellent question. No, we don't have any plans to provide a tool in that area. I think, Darren, that you hit one of the nails on the head, that network performance is a serious impact to this. These are very, very independent kind of things. I am aware, and I apologize for not knowing the exact location of this information, but there is some documentation coming out on the Active Directory performance-oriented stuff that's supposed to be on the web in the relative near future that does include some kind of raw group policy performance information. It talks about how many bytes occur given a certain number of settings and GPOs processed and OUs processed, that type of information. And I apologize for not knowing exactly when that's being published or where it is, but I have heard of it coming. And let's see, that was another one asking about performance. Here's one from David Bergstein. What kind of reporting will RSoP support for submitting documentation to change control and engineering review boards? The tool that we're developing and putting in the product won't have any specific things for that area. But suffice it to say that the data is available to somebody who would want to build a tool that could do those kinds of things. Keep in mind that our goal was to make sure that we built the underlying infrastructure in such a way that the data to do the kinds of things that you're asking in this case would be there for somebody to build a tool. In an effort to try to make sure we get this product out, we couldn't build all of those kinds of what I might call bells and whistles into the tool that we're shipping. I would highly suggest that all of you, talk to your favorite ISV and provide them with this kind of information. Let's see. Here's presence question. Will users be able to view what policies have been applied to them without having to have admin rights to view? Yes, our intent is that there will our tool will ship on professional, and it will allow them to see the policy that has applied to them. I don't know if maybe there's a follow-up to that. If you do, go ahead and send it in. And one from Smart Pipes. What, if any, of this functionality will be made available for down-level admins? I will assume that by down-level you mean Windows 2000 admins, and here are the issues there. The clients, for a client to be able to report this information on a logging mode, it must be a Whistler client. For the admin to do it in a planning mode, the server must be a Whistler server. There are some significant changes that are happening in the space of these client-side extensions and the processing that occurs in WinLogon to enable this to occur on the client. And we've added a service and the tools and the database, and there's schema changes and a whole bunch of stuff that has to occur on the server for that to happen. Okay. And another question from Darren Morelia. Will these WMI providers provide any help around monitoring GPT and GPC sync issues? For those not aware, group policy template, that's the sysvol version of the group policy object, and GPC is the group policy container or the Active Directory portion. Or will Whistler include any enhancements to the GPE, the group policy snap-in, that allows us to know if a GPO is out of sync? That is, a tool that better or more intuitive than REPLmon. No. The short answer is no. This is about reporting the result of group policy and does not directly address any of the sync issues. And I don't have any more information on that at this point. We certainly will be investigating that as we move into the next release, but it was something that was not going to make this release. Another question from Dave Hughes, I think. It looks like you can tell what policies are applied to a computer object, but will this mechanism allow us to identify the objects that are affected by a GPO? I'm not quite sure I'm catching the full intent of that question, but I believe if I'm catching the intent, the answer is yes. What it does from a planning perspective is allow you to pick out, at your level of granularity, a user and a computer and let it process and say, oh, let me have the results based upon that. And you have lots of variances after, beyond that. You can pick out just an OU for either a computer or user. You're defining which is which. And say, if I had a user in that OU, and then you can pick out security groups or leave it as none. And you can do the same thing for a computer. In fact, you're doing this in parallel. And you get to the end and say process, it would say, here's what would happen. And I'm looking to see if there are any more questions. John, did I pick them all up, or is that about it? Okay. I think maybe I missed one. I see one here from a name I didn't see. Okay, so a question from Alan Lamb. Can this tool be used on the current build of Windows 2000, or is it only used for Whistler? This is a Whistler feature. We will not be porting this back or including it in any sort of service pack kind of thing into Windows 2000. No features in service packs is kind of a mantra that we've learned. There are significant changes to the client side that affect your logon. You don't want us doing this on Windows 2000. But as I think I covered a minute ago with a separate question, once you have a Whistler server in place, it will be able to do planning mode types of things, and it would do it for any existing users or computers, because you're not actually touching the client system. So it would tell you what would occur for these Windows 2000 clients that are now connected to a Whistler DC. Okay. Here's a question from Laura Gashlin. Are there plans to add any rollback capabilities of a GPO within Whistler? The short answer is no. The kind of capability that you're talking about, again, is being looked at for the next release. And it would come first the functionality would come that would allow us to have what we conceive of as executable policy, or policy that exists on your client machine and could execute on its own even when it's not connected to the directory. And there is some possibility, and no promises, that with the technology that we would build to do that this capability would come along with it. But we'll have to see once we get way more into the development of the next release. And another question from Marty Kell. Built-in quota/data capacity type control policies. If this type of information will be addressed later in the presentation, please let me know which portion. Thanks. With that, are there going to be any enhancements to existing policies, if any? I'm guessing that the first thing there is built-in quota data capacity type control policies. In Windows 2000, there are disk quota policies. And to be honest with you, I don't know if there are any enhancements to that policy set at this point. Finally, are there enhancements to existing policies? Yes, certainly. There are a number that were postponed from Windows 2000 that are being looked at and added to the system almost on a daily basis at this point. And as we get customer requests, others will be added. What you will find is that we're not doing any speculative enhancements to any of the policies. No speculative development here. It has to be a customer need and a customer request. And so if you have if you say, geez, there should be a policy for this and I need it to do X, Y, and Z, I would encourage you to file bugs and DCRs for those kinds of features so that we can get it looked at before we get too far along. After a little while here, it's going to be very difficult to add those kinds of things. So the sooner the better. Smart pipes. Will RSoP be available for IPsec policy objects and or any other remote access policy? RAP. IPsec is already supported under Windows 2000 and will be under Whistler. And the answer is yes, RSoP will be able to show you the result of IPsec policy. The rest of the question on any other remote access policy, I have not been informed of any new policies in that area. So first we have to have the policies that exist and can be set via group policy. Then the requirement for Whistler would be if you're creating these policies, you must have a way of reporting that into WMI or you don't have a policy. So if we get the policies, we'll get the resulting set, because the goal here was to make sure that you had a complete resultant set of policy for all the group policy stuff. I don't see anything else. Am I missing something, John, or is that about it? Okay. Well, I appreciate your time and listening to this and answering our questions. Hopefully this was informative to you, and you now know more about what we'll be delivering. I look forward to your feedback as we get this thing out to you and you get a chance to take a look at it and let us know what you think at that point. Thank you very much.